Are you ready for another lesson in the art of fantasy football trading? This time it's about trading draft picks. How can you build a 3, a 4, even 5-headed monster? I'll show you right now, and I just did it in an existing Dynasty Expert League, and I built probably, I think, the best team I've ever assembled in my 15 years in this business. Let's get to it. Top 5 running back. You're watching the Fantasy Football Show. Get ready to find out how I built this team. Baker Mayfield, Dalvin Cook, Zeke Elliott, Devontae Adams, Odell Beckham Jr., and George Kittle. This is a 12-team expert keeper league. My keepers were Kittle, Adams, and Mayfield. 12 experts, very, very good sites involved. Very, very big name fantasy football sites involved. Football Guys, Fantasy Sharks, the big dogs are in this draft. If you draft a player in the 10th round, the next year you keep them for an 8th, the next year a 6th, so you lose 2 rounds every year. So Adams, amazing value back in the day, still benefiting from that. Baker Mayfield in the 18th last year gives me the ability to keep him in 16 this year, 14 next year. And I traded for Kittle, who's a 10th round keeper because he was drafted last year in the 12th. And I traded my 4th rounder and I got back a 9th, which I don't have up here. So I start out without a 4th rounder and I start out with an extra 9th, which I don't actually have the 9th on the screen. So just keep that in mind. So my keepers, again, Baker, Adams, and Kittle. I start off with that. After all the keepers, I did have a 1st rounder, but I traded for 2 more 1st rounders, at which point I got Zeke Elliott and Dalvin Cook. So had I not made any trades at all, I would have had Kittle, Adams, and Mayfield as my keepers, and I would have drafted Odell Beckham Jr. But instead of Cook and Elliott, I would have had a 2nd, a 3rd, a 4th. I'll actually show you right now how I came up with this team. So looking at the big board here, as you can see, I start off with a 1st rounder, I start off with a 2nd, I start off with a 3rd. Again, I traded my 4th, which is why it's X'd out. I got Kittle as a keeper in that trade. I got a 5th, 6th, 7th, another 7th, an 8th, a 9th. Adams is written into 9, Kittle written into 10. Mayfield, I don't have 16 rounds on this, so I have him at the bottom. You can see that he's kept as a 16th rounder. Without losing the 1.7, I'm going to eventually take Odell with that pick. But how did I get the 1.3 and the 1.6 without losing the 1.7? I'll show you. When you do draft pick trading, the key is to trade 2 for 1. You don't want to offer people really even trades where you're moving your 2nd up to the 1st, they're moving their 4th up to the 3rd. People don't get excited about that. What people get excited about is when you offer them 2 picks for 1. If you want someone's 1st rounder, don't expect them to do some kind of even Steven type deal. You need to say, hey, how about I give you my 2nd and I throw my 4th in for free? Or I give you my 2nd, my 4th, and I'll even give you my 7th. That's what I did. So for the 1.3, I traded my 2nd, my 3rd, and my 7th. At least one of them. That leaves me with a void in round 2. Round 3, I already had a void in round 4, and now one of my 7th rounders is gone. But keep in mind, my 2nd's really now in the 1st, so my void really only starts in the 3rd. I already had the void in the 4th for the Kittle trade, and then the 7th. So realistically, that trade only created a new void in round 3 and round 7. So here's the key to doing these kinds of trades. If you do 1 or 2 more trades, you're going to kick the problem or kick the can down the road so far that your voids don't really matter anymore. Right now, they could. Right now, I wouldn't have a lot of depth. Right now, I'd have a pretty big hole in my roster, but I'm going to keep going and kick the problem down the road. I want another 1st rounder. Nobody's going to accept this, right? Well, guess what? You offer enough trades to enough people, somebody's going to bite. The people that tell me, Smitty, I can't pull off these kind of trades in my league, that could be true. Maybe your league just doesn't trade. I have some of those leagues too. But oftentimes I find out that the people telling me that are offering like 1 trade, 2 trade offers. I offer literally like 7, 8, 9, 10 each wave of this process. So once I get a trade complete, I start over. I start offering 7, 8, 9, 10 trades to everybody in the league. Somebody's going to get excited about getting an extra pick. It's the nature of people who like to hoard picks or be conservative with their draft approach. Somebody will like the idea of being more conservative. And when people are on the fence of who to pick, they oftentimes don't want to draft. They'd rather trade down so they don't have to make a decision they don't want to make. So in this case, most people wouldn't be able to get a 1st rounder, or they wouldn't even try. But I didn't want to stop here. I was tempted to trade back into the second, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to get in the first. So I threw out a bunch of offers. I threw out the only picks that I had left, and I thought maybe somebody will bite. So I offered my 5, my 6, my 7, and my 8. And sure enough, I got a 1.6. Now, while I only have 3 picks in the first 8 rounds, my void doesn't really start until round 5 and go through 6, 7, and 8 because I traded my 4th rounder for Kittle. That wasn't a part of this. My 2nd rounder's in the first, my 3rd rounder's in the first, my 4th rounder was from my Kittle trade, so the only void I created was in rounds 5, 6, 7, and 8. Yes, I lost those picks entirely, but in a keeper league where people are already keeping 2 or 3 players, who's going to be there in round 5, 6, 7, and 8 anyways? And that's how I built in a very competitive, one of the most competitive expert leagues I do year after year. I got this team. I have 2 potentially top 5 running backs. I have 2 potentially top 3 or 4 overall wide receivers. I have potentially 1 top 2 to 3 QB, and I have, in my opinion, the number 1 or number 2 tight end in fantasy football. This is arguably the best fantasy football team I have ever assembled in my 15 years. And for those of you that think you can't do these trades, I encourage you to make multiple offers to each team that you're trying to acquire a pick from. And you have to keep in mind that if you're not doing the 2 for 1, if you're not giving somebody a whole extra pick, they're not going to get excited about trading away their 1st or their 2nd rounder. But if you get creative, if you get what some people will call a little crazy, people will call you crazy after you make your 1st trade. After you make your 2nd trade, you're kicking that problem down the road, and it makes a lot of people uncomfortable that you're assembling a team as good as you're assembling. And if you're so lucky to make a 3rd one of these trades where you're trading like your 7th and 8th for a 5th, and you get back another pick into that top 5, you start to realize people will no longer trade with you. Expect that. I hope you enjoyed this version of the Art of Fantasy Football Trading Draft Pick Edition. Guys, I'm going live next Friday, August 23rd for 24 straight hours here on YouTube. I have a ton of awesome interviews lined up. Andy Holloway from the Fantasy Footballer should stop by for about 20 minutes around hour 3, so don't be late. 2 p.m. Eastern, Friday, August 23rd, 24 hours live. I'll be here on YouTube, youtube.com/The Fantasy Football Show. Don't miss it. I'm doing it again. I'm live streaming for 24 hours straight on YouTube, youtube.com/The Fantasy Football Show. And probably the most exciting thing, I will be doing a 48 team follower league. And get this, here's the twist. 48 teams, 4 copies of every player in the draft pool. Think about that for a second. The bookend picks are 48 and 49. The same players at 12 and 13 in a typical league will be right there at 48 and 49. It's going to be crazy. Don't miss your chance of getting in this real league with me and all the 46 other people. How do you get in? Stay tuned. But you have to be there for this live event, 24 hours straight live stream that I'm doing on youtube.com. youtube.com/The Fantasy Football Show. Friday, August 23rd. I'll be in the studio a ton, but I'm also this time, unlike in February, hitting the streets. I'll be riding an electric scooter while I answer fantasy questions. We'll go shopping. I'll eat wings at my favorite wing spot. We're going to hit the streets. We're going to be in the studio. We're going to mock draft, do giveaways. 24 straight hours you're hanging with me on YouTube. We did it back in February. We're going to do it even bigger and better August 23rd.